Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm Ann Butler-Rice. I'm the Director of Learning and Engagement at the Wadsworth Atheneum, and I get to welcome you here tonight. This evening, I hope, is the first of many programs presented in partnership by three organizations: the Lewis Walpole Library in Farmington, Connecticut, and I hope we have some library patrons here with us tonight. The Amistad Center for Art and Culture, and the Wadsworth Atheneum Museum of Art. It's been wonderful working together to bring this program to fruition, and I want to give a special thanks to Adam Lenz and Cindy Roman, who initiated this terrific collaboration. Tonight we're honored to host Dr. Adrienne Childs, speaking in conjunction with the Walpole Library's exhibition, The Paradox of Pearls, Accessorizing Identities in the 18th Century, which is an exhibition curated by Dr. Laura Engel of Duquesne University, and it's on view at the library through the end of January 2025. Before I turn this over to the Walpole Library's director, I'd also like to acknowledge support from the Joseph and Robert Cornell Memorial Foundation Fund at the Wadsworth Atheneum that supports all of our public programs. Now please join me in welcoming Nicole Boucher to the stage.
Thank you, and good evening. And welcome to Pearl Drops and Blackamoors, the Black Body and Pearlescent Adornment in European Art, a lecture by Adrienne Childs, about whom you will hear more in a moment. As you have just been told, I am Nicole Boucher, and I'm the W.S. Lewis Librarian and Executive Director of the Lewis Walpole Library, a unit of Yale University's library system. The library owes its existence to the extraordinary vision and generosity of Wilmarth F. Lewis, Yale class of 1918, and his wife, Annie Burr Auchincloss Lewis, whose benefactions to Yale University included extraordinary collections built around Lewis's particular fascination with the British 18th century art historian, man of letters, antiquarian, and Whig politician Horace Walpole, who dates were 1717 to 1797. Since its founding in the 1920s, the library, based to this day at the Lewis home in Farmington, Connecticut, has grown into an internationally recognized research center in the field of 18th century studies, with a particular strength in the British 18th century. And it's out of those collections that the current exhibit that was just mentioned has been built. I would also mention about Laura Engel, besides being the curator for this exhibition, she is a former Lewis Walpole Library Research Fellow and a frequent collaborator with the library on various forms of programming. So it's a particular pleasure to have her come back at this time with this curation and this public event. We're tremendously grateful to the Wadsworth Atheneum and to the affiliated Amistad Center for Art and Culture for their early interest in partnering with us to bring you tonight's lecture. We wish to thank in particular Wadsworth Director Matthew Hargraves, Linda Roth, Director of Special Curatorial Projects, and Charles C. and Eleanor Lamont Cunningham, Curator of European Decorative Arts, and Vanessa Sigalis, the David Dagramont Associate Curator for Collections Research, as well as Sarah Coolness, Director of the Amistad Center, and Bethany Blake, the Amistad Associate Curator, for their enthusiastic support and practical collaboration in realizing this evening's events. It's really been a team effort. In addition, Adam Lenz's assistance as public engagement and programs manager here at the Wadsworth was invaluable in enabling us to work through many practical event logistics in a venue that we have not previously held many events at. Last but certainly not least, I too am grateful to Cynthia Roman, the Lewis Walpole Library's curator of prints and drawings and paintings, who worked with Laura Engel and others to realize the Paradox of Pearls exhibition, and also to the staff of the Lewis Walpole Library as a whole, without whose hard work and dedication none of our exhibitions, public programs, and other outreach activities and collaborations would be possible. And now it gives me great pleasure to hand the podium to Professor Laura Engel, curator of the Pearls exhibition, to introduce tonight's speaker. Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. It's an absolute thrill and honor. I want to echo Nicole Boucher's thanks to the curators at the Wadsworth and the Amistad collection and everyone here at the Wadsworth Museum who's made this event so spectacular. And I want to do a special thanks to the staff and the curators at the Lewis Walpole Library, Nicole Boucher for green lighting all of my projects and this amazing exhibit and this lecture, and Cynthia Roman, Susan Walker, and Krista McDonald. So it is my very true pleasure to introduce the extraordinary Adrienne Childs. There's so much to her background, so sit back for a minute. She is currently the Distinguished Scholar at the Leonard A. Lauder Center at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. She is an independent scholar, art historian, and curator. She's also the senior consulting curator at the Phillips Collection and currently co-curator of Vivian Brown, My Kind of Protest for the Phillips Collection. She recently curated The Color of Anxiety, Race, Sexuality, and Disorder in Victorian Sculpture at the Henry Moore Institute in Leeds, England. She was the guest curator of Rifts and Relations, African American Artists and the European Modernist Tradition at the Phillips Collection in Washington, D.C. in 2020. In April 2022, the High Museum of Art awarded Dr. Childs the 2022 Driscoll Prize in recognition of her contribution to African American art and art history. Childs co-curated the Black figure in the European Imaginary at the Cornell Fine Arts Museum at Rollins College in 2017. In addition to these exhibitions, she is co-editor of the volume of essays Blacks and Blackness in European Art of the Long 19th Century, published by Routledge. She also contributed an essay on art and activism to volume 5, part 2 of The Image of the Black in Western Art, edited by Henry Louis Gates Jr. and David Binman. As a former curator at the David C. Driscoll Center at the University of Maryland, she curated many exhibitions, including Her Story, lithographs by Margot Humphrey, Arabesque, the art of Stephanie Pogue, Creative Spirit, the art of David C. Driscoll, and Tradition Redefined, the Larry and Brenda Thompson collection of African American art. Her current book project, which is about to come out from Yale University Press in 2025, yay, woo, amazing, is an exploration of Black figures in European decorative arts entitled Ornamental Blackness, the Black Figure in European Decorative Arts. And Ornamental Blackness is the first book to examine a range of diverse objects that employed the blackamoor as a decorative motif. According to Childs, the vogue for representing the African body in European luxury items served to disseminate tropes of Blackness throughout spaces of wealth and refinement in Europe and beyond. Becoming increasingly popular in the 18th and 19th centuries, objects such as porcelain figures, clocks, light fixtures, torchère, furniture, and more represented not only the aristocratic taste for exoticism, but a physical manifestation of the Black laboring body in the guise of fashion and decor. Ornamental Blackness employs a diversified approach to the role of symbolism in decorative arts and speaks to how the ideas presented by these objects operated in the theater of sumptuous living, end quote. So we are thrilled to be learning more about this project in tonight's lecture, which is entitled Pearl Drops and Blackamoors, the Black Body and Pearlescent Adornment in European Art. So please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Adrienne Childs.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Laura. I really appreciate being here. And I really appreciate inviting me to give a talk in association with the paradox of pearls, exhibition curated by Laura Engel. And thanks also go to Cynthia Roman for organizing this, Adam Lenz for organizing as well, and all the people here at the Wadsworth and the Walpole Library. I appreciate it. And a shout out to my friends who've come from our racialized porcelain working group. Yes. Yeah, it's a closed society, I'm sorry. Can't know anything more about it. Okay, I was thrilled to be asked to give a presentation in conjunction with this exhibition on pearls and representation in European art because it intersects with the constellation of interests of mine: ornamentation, black bodies, European luxury arts, and the conundrum of what I call ornamental blackness. And Laura really gave a good introduction, but you're going to have to hear it again. Ornamental blackness is a term I coined to describe a style of luxury object or representational scheme in which the figure of a black African or a person of African descent is treated as a decorative motif. This term has tentacles in the fields of material culture, decorative arts, histories of trade and slavery, colonialism, and race studies. It conjures notion of a particular kind of taste that's linked to the European collector's desire for the black figure. So you are looking at a painting that I believe is an 18th century portrait of a young black man wearing a slave collar. I have been collecting these images for decades. So I went to find something to show, and all this is perfect. Of course, I have no idea who painted it, and it's like very irresponsible for me to bring that here. But I thought the fact that I'm not sure anything about it, other than I'm fairly sure it's 18th century, is it goes to the ubiquity of this kind of image, because it almost doesn't matter. It's part of the kind of culture that we're talking about. But he's wearing a slave collar, livery of some sort, and a lustrous pearl earring. His head is turned, glancing over his shoulder at an angle such that his pearl drop earring is prominently displayed. The pearl picks up the light, as does his polished silver slave collar. The paradox of pearls indeed. Why would an enslaved man be pictured like this? How does his status as a non-human jibe with this elegant portrait? And why has it taken so very long for us as historians, collectors, and observers of this trope in the visual arts to even question it? In fact, it is my, I changed too soon, but that's okay. In fact, it is my premise that black bodies in European luxury arts, both ornamented and ornamental, are problematic evidence of how adept European culture was at packaging their project of domination, exploitation, expansion, and superiority. Yes, packaging these operations in pretty pictures, fine furnishings, exquisite decorative arts, and shiny baubles, like the one I'm wearing. I'm actually wearing a Blackamoor pin, so I am a paradox tonight. Luxury objects and other trappings of wealth and power don't just passively reflect these issues. They are operative, they are functional, they are tools in the process of building and maintaining this power, building and maintaining this system. And fine craftsmanship and beauty tend to blind us to these deeper entanglements. Of course, in recent years, scholars, critics, collectors, viewers, and artists have noted the fraught nature of the representation of black figures in European art and sought to interrogate it. Carrie James Marshall's painting, Pink Towel, on the right, seems to target our topic for the evening: Western art history, black bodies, ornamentation, and the multi-layered associations that the pearl brings to this equation. Marshall is known for his figures with undifferentiated black skin, a skin color that is purposefully non-naturalistic. It's a rhetorical tool for Marshall. It both acknowledges the reductive nature of being categorized as black without nuance, what is that? But it also embraces blackness through the humanity of the figures and the worlds that he creates for them. Marshall is an artist steeped in art history, aware of the fraught representation of Black bodies in Western art, and aims to be part of the conversation, both as an inheritor of that legacy and an agitator. Here he's clearly nodding and winking to the fraught tradition of pairing a Black body with pearlescent adornment, thinking about what we're going to be talking about this evening. But I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge Marshall's nod to the most famous earring wearer in the history of art, Vermeer's Girl with the Pearl Earring from 1665. He's clearly engaging with the power of the masterpiece, the mythology of certain iconic images, and their historical investment in whiteness, albeit here she's got an exotic twist. Vermeer's painting is a tronie or a type, and in this case, an exoticized woman wearing a turban. That turban makes her exotic, and the luscious pearl does as well. So what is interesting when I look at these three works separated by centuries, I see the lineage of the exotic type and the exotic pearl shifting meaning in different contexts, particularly in relation to Blackness, or the way that Blackness was perceived and actually constructed. So, of course, I'm going to go all over the map, and I have to show you the Paston treasure, a 17th century painting done for the English Paston family. The painter is unknown, but he's working in a Dutch still life genre. There's been a lot of ink spilled on this painting, let me tell you. And it's really interesting. But my reason for presenting this compendium of luxury objects is that it provides a glimpse into how Blackness, Black people, figure into this bigger conception of Europe's wealth at that time. This sampling includes natural and exotic objects from across the globe, such as seashells, fruit, flora, a monkey, depicted alongside finely crafted objects that combine natural resources with artificial embellishments to form sort of ostensibly functional things like the drinking vessel or a musical instrument. So note and of course there is an image of the Black youth with the monkey on his shoulder. So where does he fit into this assembly of luxury objects? I propose that he is both a natural resource, a slave servant, but he's like a commodity, right? And like the Nautilus cup, he's also an object that's been embellished with materials such as fine fabrics, pearl earring, that increase his value and make him into something else. In this way, he becomes a creation, a luxury fabrication that is part of the collection. Like the gilded nautilus shell, a contrived ornament. Now, what the previous slide and this lecture will demonstrate is that within the European imaginary, the Black body has been a canvas for ornamental flourish for centuries. Oh, and also, sometimes I'm not going to tell you the name of what the art is that you're looking at, so you have to read it yourself, just because a lot of these things are demonstrating a bigger idea. Now, whether kings, soldiers, saints, or servants, Black characters were often depicted with overdetermined ornamentality, such that it seemed that the very fact of their Blackness somehow generated or required excess or external markers of difference. Perhaps a notion that their natural state was excessive. From far away, they're dark, they're primitive, they're not Christian. And ornament and adornment somehow helps to reflect this difference. For my work on ornamental Blackness, I situate this trend as growing squarely within the representation or out of the representation of the Black magus or the Black king in images of the adoration of the Magi you're looking at here. Indeed, the Black king is frequently represented in outlandish or outsized clothing and jewelry. Here in Martin de Vos's late 16th century interpretation, he is pictured in a Roman costume, revealing a kind of youthful, muscular body. And of course, if you study these types of images, you know, this narratives, the Black king is usually the youngest anyway, and the furthest afield in terms of their relationship to the baby, or the Christ child. He wears a crown, he holds a scepter in one hand and a nautilus shell, there it goes again, vessel, as a gift in the other. While all three are dressed lavishly, he is more embellished, and he's the only one wearing earrings. In fact, throughout my study, I note that we almost never see European men depicted wearing earrings. But for Black men, it's a conventional detail. Now, they wear other jewelry, but you very rarely see them wearing earrings. Now, by the 18th century, quickly, when we get to Casali's version of the Black king, the pearl is the standard form of adornment for both women, white women, Black women, and Black men. Note that, as if to prefigure Kerry James Marshall, his dark skin is cast against the white turban, the pearl necklace, and the earrings. I mean, and this just becomes a very conventional kind of adornment for this figure. So what are the layers of signification that come along with a Black person in pearls? You're looking at a print of about exploration, pearl extraction that's coming in after Columbus discovers South America. It's off the coast of Venezuela. Pearls are in fact a luxury commodity that was imported. The influx of pearls into Europe comes as an outgrowth of the Spanish conquest of the Americas. Columbus's discovery of the island of Cubagua and Margarita, an area that's later known as the Pearl Coast. They found an already robust practice of pearl diving conducted by indigenous people. Now, I must stop here to credit Monica Dominguez Torres for her book, Pearls for the Crown, from which I draw this material. But as it would go with many of these other enterprises, the exploitation of native labor was devastating to the community. The Spanish merchants found that Black people from the west coast of Africa, because of their expertise in swimming and diving, were uniquely suited for this kind of work. Therefore, the demand for Black slave labor on the Pearl Coast increased exponentially. We see that Black pearl divers represented in this book that documents the natural, we see Black pearl divers represented in a book documenting natural history, and most of the other pages are flora, flowers, fruits, and things like that, trees. And again, the Black industry here is a natural resource. Again, Black people here are part of the natural resource. Okay, I just said that. So here's a detail of the book illustration. We see naked pearl divers jumping into the water with their baskets. While the workers were skilled, it remained a dangerous enterprise. The amount extracted from this area provided Europe with an abundance of pearls and eventually caused depletion of this supply and ecological issues in the area. But once the pearls become very popular in Europe, in courts, in wealthy circles, this was where the supply was coming from. And Black divers remained linked to the industry, as seen in this late 19th century image of pearl diving in the Persian Gulf. So that area is not the only place on earth where there's pearl diving, but there is a nexus between the pearls coming into Europe through these trades and Black labor. So this relationship between Black labor and pearls is just one of the many instances in which Africa, the idea of Africa, becomes associated with objects and materials that Africans extract from other parts of the world. I tried to say that clearly, and I have to say it again because I don't even know what I just said. So the relationship between Black labor and pearls is part of this notion of Africa that is associated with material and objects that Africans extract, but not from Africa, from the Americas, from South America, from North America, Central. I mean, they become associated with materials that are not even quote unquote African, right? Here we see an allegory of Africa, very famous, Jan van Kessel, which is one part of a multi-part work of art, but I'm just focusing on the Africa section. We see this allegory of Africa among attributes that include a lion, serpent, seashells, and coral, so other things that you might find on the continent, and therefore they would be apt symbols. But pearls, the figure of Africa wears pearls, and pearls are draped on the table next to her in a very kind of sensuous way. It's interesting how pearls are always seen often falling over a table. I mean, do you really ever let your pearls fall over the table? No. But it's something about that, Laura, that's what you have to figure out. Why are they spilling out all the time when they're not on you? And what about the silver? Extracted in South America with native and enslaved black labor. What about the tobacco with these figures here? Those are rolls of tobacco. It's a New World crop, wholly embedded in the slave labor system, but and certainly labored on with African labor, but coming out of North America. And of course, we have the requisite gold nautilus cup. But my favorite African commodity here is the blue and white Chinese porcelain. I can't tell you how this is related to the continent, but what I can tell you is that Africa and Africans were frequently projected onto European luxury consumption. Again, we might now call it disinformation that distracts from the actual issues at hand. Indeed, Allegory of Africa by Rosalba Carriera. Here's an image of a lovely black woman with a sizable set of pearl earrings and necklace. As we know, an allegory represents an idea, a personified in a female body. But her beauty and elegance belie Africa's place in the world order that the personification of the four continents claims to represent. So the four continents claims is a world order that is contrived by European view. Africa is one, and often presented, fairly equally or with kind of equal flourish in some cases, even though there are some differences. But this kind of representation totally distracts us from the realities of what that world order is at the time. While we have seen kings and allegories with pearls that hint at enslavement through the association, there is a point where European representation of black figures squarely depicts black slaves and captives. You don't have to reach and figure it out or make associations. Now, in this case, captivity is associated with the Italian victory over the Ottoman threat, celebrated by Sebastiano Ricci here at the end of the 17th century and in the Gallery Colonna in Rome. And the black man in chains rises up in the middle ground. He's a son of Africa, but he's there among some other allegorical figures, and you see the Ottoman threat there with holding chains, holding Europe in chains, and Africa in chains. But Asia is very calm because she's one of the winners, if you will. But of course, this is just one part because the end of the story is that the Italians triumph over this. So we encounter that black figure wearing a chain and an armband, the unmistakable garniture of slavery, or in this case, captivity, because we can't think of him as a slave in the sort of black Atlantic sense. There were black people who were part of the Mediterranean squabbles between Europe and Italy and North Africa, et cetera. But you're getting a little slippage there. And of course he's wearing the requisite pearl earring. So I'm going to venture a guess and state that it is quite unlikely that a captive would have been wearing a pearl earring, or would have sported a gilded quiver and bow, for that matter. But that's not the point here. All of the figures are stylized and embellished. This is not meant to represent reality. the idea of the real world, the idea of this history. And essential to this story, telling of this history, are Black Africans that have been indelibly linked to both captivity and enslavement, and here punctuated by the white luster of the pearl as a signature ornament. Thus far, we have been considering the use of the pearl on the Black body, its compelling contrasts, affiliation with overseas mercantilism. But what happens when the pearl is the Black body? Here you are looking, I love that. I love this thing. I don't know what to say about it though, so I'm gonna make it up. No, but until now we've been looking at pearl depictions, right? The body, but here the body and the hat are pearls. The pearl itself was likely collected by what we call a princely collector, or at least an aristocratic collector. It's in the Walters Museum, and they attribute it to the Dresden court because so many of them were very similar, but I don't know if the jury might still be out on that one. So he would have commissioned, attributed to a collector, and I say he, because it was most likely he. But he would have then commissioned he would have collected the pearl and then commissioned an artisan skilled at taking natural materials and transforming them into spectacular luxury objects. They might then be displayed in a treasury. This would have been a curious object meant to sort of delight, inspire, and amuse the collector and their guests. And it may even have been jewelry. And later on, they did put a little hook for a necklace for it. And in this case, the artisan created a figure around this misshapen pearl with silver. The figure is made in silver that was enameled to mark skin and to depict basically a racial type. The piece is appointed with diamonds, and they say rubies or glass. Look at the red eyes, they're kind of interesting. And the figure is bound, you see in the back there, the ropes on the hands behind the back. Crafted from the symbols of wealth and accumulation, this embodies one of the main kind of conundrums, right, of ornamental blackness. What did the artisan see in that particular pearl that said, oh, Black captive? Why would that have even occurred to someone? What does it mean to use this exalted material, like pearls, to craft a kind of lowly figure? Well, this kind of play on class and racial distinctions, the interest in outsiders, is precisely what we see throughout treasury art and porcelain design, right, people? Here you're looking at a dancer, or no, this is it, a dancing, drunken dwarf gambler. I know I shouldn't even be laughing, but any of you Game of Thrones fans, I'm thinking of Tyrion Lannister. I wonder if he would be happy or not happy about this. But he is part of Dresden's Green Vault collection. He actually is part of that Green Vault collection and has been well preserved. So there's a kind of comic amusement factor that goes along with these kinds of figures, like a court dwarf or a fool. But were African captives amusing? Again, this is the paradox and the problematic associated with much of this imagery. The Black captive / servant / slave / allegory, whatever it is, has become a decorative stock character that is repeated and rehearsed without much consideration of the nuances that Blackness brings to the equation in 18th century Europe. I mean, it's often difficult to see where one of these identities ends and the other begins. That's why it's so hard to actually talk about the narratives that we might find in paintings and objects and say, well, what was it supposed to represent? It's very hard to, often very hard to actually determine that. So while we don't know for sure, if the Walters piece was made for the infamous Green Vault. We do know that these were. And I went to the Green Vault. Oh my God. I definitely drank the Kool-Aid there. They were spectacular. In fact, black figures or Moors feature prominently in some of the most opulent objects that Augustus the Strong, who was the Elector of Saxony, commissioned for his Green Vault. The abundance of these ornamental Moors in the collection reflects both the spectacle of court life, in which Moors could be found in theatrical roles, as well as servants, and the general taste for ornamental blackness that had spread across Europe during the 17th century flourished among these courts. They were all intertwined with each other, definitely looking at the court of Louis XIV, where we find a lot of this kind of material crafted into silver, then melted down, so we don't have it anymore. But thank goodness they have inventories. But yeah, it's a fascinating collection, and the curator there, who was wonderful, wrote that he called these objects, many objects like this, African exoticism. And I don't really like critiquing people, but I wanted to, in my book, I wanted to make it clear, it's not like they are representing themselves. This is not like, oh, the African exoticism, like we are taking what we see in them, and no, this is a complete fabrication, a complete fantasy that is imposed upon them. It has nothing to do with their own culture or anything like that. But to be clear on this context here, aside from a brief effort to enter the slave trade undertaken by Prussia's Brandenburg Africa Company, German states had no substantive stake in the colonial project or the Black Atlantic world. The world in which black bodies circulated as enslaved workforce, the world in which black divers extracted pearls off the coast of South America. But I contend that these kinds of objects traded on this matrix of domination and luxury nonetheless. Plus, ornamental blackness was trendy. It was in vogue. So you are looking at Moors with pearl shells by court sculptor Balthasar Permoser and jewelry by Dinglinger. These are done by very highly skilled and well-regarded sculptors who worked for the court. The two black youths in pseudo sort of Native American garb that coming from print culture. A lot of these print culture is going to inform these works of art. They hold natural, monstrous pearls, I'm quoting that, in their hands. Essentially, these figures, made out of lacquered wood, gold, silver, and other precious stones, were created to display the unusual pearls. They are the mounts for the natural objects. They are functional stands that present the unusual raw objects of nature, the objects of desire. They're interlocutors. Molly Warsh refers to the Baroque pearl as a pathology of nature that is transformed into art, a signifier of the independence of taste, in the interdependence of taste and the ungovernable diversity of the world. Now, I love that idea that the ungovernability of the Baroque pearl, you cannot control it, resonates with this conception of black people as closer to nature, primitive, outside of the control of civilization. In Ornamental Blackness, the book, it will be in bookstores next year, I tried to make the point that the excessively decorative nature of representing black figures is a means of control. It governs the ungovernable. It mitigates that menace, the unknowable. There's a lot out there of theoretical ideas about Europeans really understanding and able to really know Africans. And therefore, there's the way that these kinds of fantasies shroud them in something they can understand. As we have seen, figure groups designed to embellish a pearl can take on many forms. This piece in the Green Vault is one that is not just not just passively reflecting connections to overseas expansion, commerce, trade, and luxury, but it actually tells the story. Now, this pearl looks like I could see where you could get camel from this, even though they did break it and put it together. But that pearl says camel to me. And camel says blackamoor. So building a visual narrative around this extraordinary natural pearl, the designer crafted a multi-figure work depicting a camel attended by two male blackamoor figures, one riding the pearly beast, while the other is seated on the base. And a third blackamoor, this time a female, is painted on the enamel down below on that base. And here is where the story is being played out. The woman in this picture, in her typical blackamoor outfit with feathered skirt and hat, and of course now a pearl necklace and earrings, and strands of pearls hanging from her wrists. She stands among trunks of objects, clearly imported from distant lands, and you see the ship in the background. Fabrics, more pearls and jewels, and once again, blue and white china. I'm telling you, the ship in the distance signals the European luxury trades that are celebrated in this piece. Here, the black woman is a conduit between the sources of these riches and their destinations. Now, I'm going to take a big detour. More than a century later, Charles Devalet of the Sèvres porcelain factory, French, revisits the issue of black women and the trade in precious jewels. This time, the black women are the consumers, and this is very unusual, actually. I'm calling this pseudo-ethnographic because I think that he's trying to talk about these women actually in their own context. Like I said, these other pieces were not. So on this box, all 4 sides, 5 sides, even the top, depicts women in their toilettes from across the world. But of course, this one is the most raucous. The African women are depicted oogling the luxury wares brought to their shores by white traders. You see the traders there. There's a mirror, all kinds of goodies. And then the ship in the distance. You really always, when you see that ship, you know about the journey. The African women lust after the fine fabrics and the jewelry. And the central woman with that beautiful purple orchid color fondles her pearls. Clearly, there is a slippery slope between the notion of the black woman as a mascot for the luxury trades, like we find in the pearl piece, and the black woman as an enthusiastic but unrefined consumer of luxury traded goods. And this is I don't know how to really talk about this piece. We do know, as an aside, that beads were traded in Africa for slaves. And so they become certain kinds of European beads, particularly Italian glass beads or Czech glass beads, become a kind of precious commodity once it gets into their system. So there's an idea that that there is a demand for this, but it comes at a different kind of price. So now I will try to bring you toward some familiar works, bring you toward them, not get there yet, of course, in your collection here at the Wadsworth, via this next section that I like to call Beauty and the Blackamoor. There has been a lot of attention given to this disturbing trend of featuring slaves in aristocratic European portraiture, particularly French, English, Dutch, German. So these themes will be quite familiar to you. In our examination of the black figure and pearls, these conventional portraits seem to loom large and present another sub-theme, servitude and contrast. You're looking at because we haven't seen things where we have two people, both in black and white, in the painting, in the work of art necessarily. So you're looking at a Dutch portrait of Margaretha I can't pronounce the last name, on your left, and then the Duchess of Portsmouth on your right. The Duchess of Portsmouth, Louise de Caroule, is a French woman, but she's an English duchess by this time. So the notion of contrast is central to the origins of this trope. There is a dialogue between the black skin of the servant in the Mignard portrait and the white of the pearls around her neck, the pearls in the nautilus shell that she holds, and the pearly white skin of the mistress. The pearls are not solely the adornment of the black slave by any means. They are an important aspect of the construct of the beauty of the French woman, like we're learning in the exhibition. She wears pearl earrings and is being offered a cache of pearls by her servant in another nautilus shell. These nautilus shells will not go away. Symbolically rich, how might the pearls reflect the Duchess's identity, or the identity contrived for the Duchess in this particular portrait? For this, I will quote the eminent Laura Ingalls' publication for a Paradox of Pearls exhibition. She writes, "Pearls are a paradox because they signify many contradictory things simultaneously: virginity, sexuality, purity, luxury, authenticity, deception, singularity, variety. These contradictions," writes Ingalls, reflect the complexities of emerging ideas about femininity and display. And I would add that the complexities become even messier when the black servant, slave, child is wearing the same pearls. It's interesting how in all these portraits, of course, another aside, you see children, mostly children, and you know that they often are real people in the households and the courts, and they never grow up. But the people really did grow up. You very rarely see a grown man next to a woman in these kind of portraits. So, is the child sexualized or pure? If you think about those dichotomies, can a black figure even be pure? The portrait of Margaretha poses the same issues. Her young black servant, clad in pearls, earrings, seems to be helping her into the pearl bracelet, fondling them. The intimacy with which both of these young people interact with both the pearls and their mistresses suggests an almost motherly kind of attitude toward these young people that belies the tides of exploitation that carried them to these positions in the first place. Competing ideas are embedded in works like these and can't really be untangled. So I think we should unpack these works to understand their multidimensionality, but we can't call them solely one thing or another. But what the kind of work I'm doing is trying to unpeel some of these other ideas that we might consider. Now, as a quick aside, another aside, I want to bring attention to the pearly nautilus shell and the black figure in the collection of the Wadsworth. And I've had the opportunity to talk to Linda and Vanessa about this. This is a treasury object similar to what we have seen today all throughout these paintings. But I think it's worth considering in the context of pearlescence and luxury materiality. The writer seems to me to be kind of an allegory of Africa as opposed to strictly a servant. But this operates within this sort of vortex of the exotic materiality of the shell. And you all need to tell me exactly where these shells come from. But that's something I haven't looked into. And its dependence on blackness that we have been discussing. So it's all of a piece, and it's hard to disentangle. So I hope that in light of all of the things that we've discussed today, we see how complex and intricate that these works in your collection are. The construction of beauty in European art of the 17th and 18th centuries was often tied up with Europeans' entanglements with overseas enterprises that brought objects, animals, flora, precious material, and people to Europe that were evidence of sort of a great wealth-creating expansion. And pearls are just one part of this system. So when it comes to people of African descent caught up in this project of accumulation and luxury, they were more than likely subordinated or sexualized, ornamentalized, misunderstood, or exoticized kind of beyond recognition. Certainly they don't reflect themselves. or they may not even be real people to begin with. And the affiliation with the beauty of pearls just made the paradox even more luminescent. I want to thank you for your time, and I leave you with the understanding that today, the lure of pearls no longer carries these fraught associations with ornamentalized servitude or the exclusive realm of the feminine. Pharrell Williams, who designs menswear for Louis Vuitton, has embraced the beauty of pearls, and perhaps his fashion statement can be seen as a healing gesture. Thank you. And I'm happy to take questions if I haven't gone over.
We do have microphones in the back. Just raise your hand and we'll bring one to you.
Oh, boy.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. That was a really great talk. I just had a quick question. I love your usage of ornamental as a kind of gerund or an active adjective. And I was just curious, do you see a distinction between ornamentalizing someone as opposed to objectifying them? Or if those two are related? And you don't have to answer this if you don't.
Yes, I think that objectifying someone it can be a big pyramid under with, you can be objectified in many ways. And ornamentalizing these black bodies is a sort of specific way, a specific style of objectification. And there's something that calls for ornament, something, and I haven't really put my hand on it, but starting in the 17th century, and I think with the Black King is a good place to start. There's something about black people that Europeans want to laden with ornament. So there's a certain ilk or strain of being objectified. And there's no real understanding about these people. But on the other hand, if you really want to pull the lens back, what about African kings? What did they really know about gold and the use of that kind of ornament in West Africa? You know what I mean? So there might be some other ways to think about some analogous actual identity creation of African people, but I don't know that it's well known at that time, so it's still a fantasy. I don't know if that's answered. Oh, excuse me. Pardon me?
The China is for ballasting ships.
For balancing ships? Yeah. Oh, okay. But I always think that in images like that, particularly when you're of a small space, or you very carefully choose what you want to show. There's a difference between the reality of what they would be doing on that ship and the fantasy that's being created by these images. But so I think there's something important about that axis between Asia and Africa that we find coming up in decorative objects and porcelain and all kinds of other areas that comes up in it's a kind of a whimsical almost thing.
Thank you for your talk.
Thank you.
I'm a layman to both the study of the period and the medium, but the term you're using, blackamoor, is a descriptor that I'm not familiar with, and I'm just wondering if you could put that in context of the study.
Yes, and I'm bandying it about since I just wrote a whole book based around that. But that's a term, I would say, kind of rooted in English. The English used to refer to the people from North Africa as Moors, and then there was a kind of a differentiation between types of Moors. There's Black Moors, Tawny Moors, thinking about different kinds of people from North Africa. And this idea of a Black Moor was something they called black people. And it eventually gets morphed into a way of talking about objects that are created that represent black people. And then by the 18th century, the blackamoor is like a decorative object. And a lot of times people think that they're created, or they began in Italy, those objects like holding a torch or something like that. They call them blackamoors. So there's a literary reference. Even Shakespeare calls people blackamoors. And then it just gets co-opted into the decorative arts lingo. But in France, they might just call those objects moors, M-A-U-R-E. And in Italy, they might call them mori or more. So it's an Anglified way of talking about decorative objects with black bodies. And it's really fraught. Yeah, but I need to be better at explaining that.
Hi, I'm actually interested in learning more about your interpretation of the what you called was exalted materials. They're sculpted to depict bound slave. And what do you think that means? Is it domination? Is it some kind of, I don't know, I guess that's what came to mind for me.
Well, there's a whole tradition in European art of depicting captives that are not, the vanquished, peoples that the Greeks have conquered, and so you might build a temple or build a building where you have these people holding up the entablature of the building, and they are the captives because it's presenting your victory. It's a celebration of your victory over people. So there's a long tradition of presenting captives in these subordinate. They're not all black by any stretch of the imagination. So, like, there's a whole Palazzo Colonna where we saw the mural. There's a whole group of tables, console tables, and underneath the tables are sitting these captives. They're in chains. And there's a beautiful gilded console tables, and underneath people are, cowering. But that is supposed to represent the victory over the Ottoman threat. And so that kind of morphs later on when you see black people in chains. And it's not like there was a threat. Every context is different. So there wasn't a war, but this is issues of captivity that Europeans, British, and French are, dealing with Africans. But it's a bigger tradition, and it's about celebrating victory. And in those days, it was not seen as something shocking. We may know, and I don't want to get too political, of people in captivity right now across this globe. We would never celebrate that, pick images of them dressed up and in chains and being held captive. I mean, our sensibilities would never do that now. And they did not have that same kind of sensibilities because a lot of this work is being driven by the people in power, the courts, and they're, very rarefied contexts, and they're hiring skilled artists who are traveling around. There might be German artists coming to Italy and making these fabulous objects. And they're there for the glorification of the monarch or the court or whatever situation they're in. Everybody doesn't have a captive in their house. So, we have to remember that this is for a certain echelon of society. But they did not see it in the same way we see it. And so we can look back on with our 21st century view and say, okay, but we do kind of have to peel back the layers to see what it is. And that's why I don't want to say throw all this material out. No, but we just need to kind of learn about it and see where the blind spots might have been.
I was going to, one more question.
Alicia?
Thank you for your fascinating presentation.
Thank you.
And my question is about how sometimes there's a fusion in the imagery between black people and indigenous people, especially the feathers.
The Native American people, yeah. Oh yes, there's a slippage there that happens. The allegory of America sometimes you would at points represent someone with feathered hat and feathered skirt, and there are certain attributes like a crocodile, I think is America, or is that tell me people, or is that but then somehow at some point during the slave, I mean, as the Black Atlantic world is going, okay, let's get everybody implicated in that. The America allegory sometimes will be represented as black, and the Africa allegory will sometimes be represented with that generic feathered headdress. Even in America, when, let's say, there's runaway slaves are being hunted, and there's an ad in the newspaper. We're talking 17th century. They show the runaway slave in a feathered headdress. I mean, this becomes the shorthand for a slave. And it's a morph. It just morphs and morphs. That really is interesting to me, because that's what people read, and they see it, and they know what it is.
Thank you so much, Dr. Childs, for giving us so much to explore and unpack.
Thank you.